When it comes to the type of glue that holds atoms together, there's basically two different kinds called ionic and covalent bonding, and we'll look at both of those. And when we look at ionic and covalent bonding, we want to know some things like how are the molecules held together? Like what is the glue that kind of keeps the atoms stuck to each other? Why are the atoms at all these weird angles? Like you'd think they'd be just like AB, AB, AB linear, or maybe something like that. But in reality, you see a whole bunch of different varieties. Why aren't they all flat? All right, another good question. Can we predict the structure of new molecules? Like you make a new molecule with a biochemical marker in it, maybe you can make some predictions as to what it looks like. And also, of course, as a chemist, it would be cool to know how the structure is related to the chemical and physical properties, like the melting points and boiling points, what things will react with what, stuff like that. So those are the kind of questions we're going to go through as we talk about this section, and it's amazing how well chemists are able to answer these things, as we'll see. So there's two extreme forms of bonding, which is the kind of glue, if you will, that holds molecules together. And the first one, which is the strongest, is ionic bonding. And in an ionic bond, some atom gives up an electron to another atom. It's a metal giving up an electron to the nonmetal. So as you can see from that example right there, sodium metal has one extra electron on the outside, and it's happy more or less to give up its electron to chlorine. And chlorine has a spot for it there. And when that happens, you end up then with a positive sodium because it's lost an electron, and a negative chlorine because it has an extra electron. And that positive-negative attraction is actually quite strong. It's called an ionic bond. It's one of the strongest kinds of atomic bonds that are known. And sodium chloride, you can see on the upper right-hand corner there, has alternating sodium chloride ions. In that diagram, the purple atoms are sodiums and the chlorines are green. Anions are usually bigger than the atoms they come from, and cations, like sodium, are usually smaller than the atoms they come from. So the smaller atoms will be the sodiums, the purples, and the bigger ones will be the chlorines or chlorides, the greens. But there's another kind of bonding which is really important too, and it's called covalent bonding. In a covalent bond, the atoms don't actually donate electrons to each other. They actually share all of the electrons. So this is kind of the sharing bonding. Covalent bonding is certainly not as strong as ionic bonding, but it's very prevalent. It's mostly common amongst nonmetals with nonmetals, like nitrogen there on the right-hand side. Now you'd think that at first, like, oh, covalent bonds must be lame because they're not as strong as ionic bonds. But in all fairness, covalent bonds, being not as strong, are much more flexible. And when you're talking about life forms like you and me, wow, you need flexible bonds. You need bonds that can attach and detach relatively easily. And a covalent bond does a really great job for that. So just because they're weaker doesn't mean that they're lame. All right, there actually are a lot of uses for covalent bonds, as we'll see in this chapter and beyond. Now, most bonds kind of have a mixture of both ionic and covalent, and so chemists will talk about them as mostly covalent or mostly ionic, and sometimes it's really hard to tell, like the metalloids on the periodic table kind of fall in between there usually. But we'll talk about all this as we go through. Now, to be fair, there are other types of bonding. We won't talk about them so much in our classes, but I want you to hear these names. Metallic bonding is used for pure metals. So if you have a pure aluminum metal sample, that's going to use metallic bonding, or sodium or mercury, etc., etc. Metavalent bonding is a brand new type of bonding scheme for metalloids that people have developed, and that's a very, very new, within the last couple of years, kind of a bonding scheme. So there are other kinds of bonding, but most of the time you can get by really well with just understanding ionic and covalent bonding and know if they're kind of halfway in between. It is important to know when you have a compound which is ionic, covalent, or metallic, and we'll develop our skills on this as we go through. But overall, an ionic bond is usually present between a metal and a nonmetal, or a cation and an anion, while a covalent molecule usually has nonmetals with nonmetals. So you won't see any metals in a covalent bond usually, although we'll come back to this in Chemistry 223. Metallic bonds would be just for pure metals. So if you had a sample of just just copper or just nickel or just cobalt, something like that, then you would have a metallic bond.
A crystal of potassium bromide has a distinctive shape with perpendicular edges. This shape directly reflects the arrangement of the ions in the crystal lattice. The compound is composed of alternating potassium ions and bromide ions.
Ionic bonds are very, very strong, and sometimes in the macroscopic world, the world of you and me that we see with remote controls and pencils and computers and stuff like that, sometimes the things we see actually are represented on the atomic level. This is potassium bromide, which has very strong ionic bonds. You can see every other potassium bromide. Again, the smaller ones are usually the cations, and the bigger ones are the anions, so the smaller green ones are potassiums, the bigger red ones are bromides. But anyway, you can actually see this in the crystal structure then of potassium bromide. So it's a very, very strong kind of bond. So if you hear electrostatic forces, people are talking about ionic bonds, things with a positive and a negative charge. And Coulomb's law, which is a law that's used to talk about positive and negative attraction, is what chemists can use to talk about the strengths of the bonds too, which is kind of cool. This equation up in the upper right-hand corner is Coulomb's law. And in physics, you might actually calculate the newtons, which is a type of force, between the positive part and the negative part. But in chemistry, at least at this level, what we're going to do is we're going to use the results of Newton's law, but we won't actually talk about Newton's law. So what I'd like to do is I'd like you to focus, first of all, on the top part of this equation, where there's n plus e times n minus e. So first of all, the positive and negative, that's the positive like metal cation, and the other part is the negative non-metal anion. And you can have more than one charge, like you can have a positive 2 or a positive 3. That's what the n means. It's the number of positive charges. And the n by the minus would be the number of negative charges. Like oxide is 2 minus, that would be n of 2, etc., etc. But anyway, what that's trying to say is that the number of positive and the number of negative charges will make your force go up. So if you have a positive 1, negative 1 interaction, which you see in the middle kind of part right there, it's very strong. It's like a single handshake. It's pretty strong. It'll keep the molecule together, definitely. But oh boy, if you have a positive 2, negative 2, like on the bottom one right there, that's even stronger. It's like a double handshake, which would be harder for a person to break up than a single handshake. So the more charges you have, the more the force is going to kick in, and your thing will be a lot stronger. So that's what the top part of Coulomb's law says. Positive 1, negative 1 is strong. Positive 2, negative 2 is much stronger. And if you happen to have a positive 3, negative 3, that would be stronger yet. It gets even more and more intense. But there's another part of Coulomb's law which is important, and that's the denominator, the bottom. It's the distance between ions. And you can see in the lithium fluoride example there, the D is literally the distance between the middle of the cation and the middle of the anion. And as that distance gets bigger, then the force gets smaller. And conversely, if the distance between the ions gets smaller, then the force gets bigger. So on the right-hand side in the lower part, you can see there's a small distance and there's also a big distance. And the small distances will have a much stronger force. Things in the bottom are the opposite. So small in the bottom means big in the top. So small distance means big force. And oh man, if those two ions are close to each other, that usually means you have a really strong force. On the other hand, in the bottom there, it's showing you have a big distance between them. Big distance means small force. They're opposite each other. So those are the two things that affect ionic bonds. The more charges you have, the stronger the force will be. On the other hand, as the distance between the ions gets smaller, the force gets bigger as well. So on the left-hand side there, then we can start talking about this. Coulomb's law describes electrostatic forces, the strength between the positive and the negative parts of the ion. As the ion charges increase, your attractive force increases as well, all right? So the charges get bigger, the attractive force gets bigger, and you have a stronger bond. On the other hand, the next one, as the distance increases, then your attractive force begins to decrease. So the distance distance is opposite. So if you want the strongest bond possible, you want the maximum number of ionic charges. So like +2 or -2, or even better yet, +3, -3 would be even stronger. But you also want them to be as close together as possible. The smallest distance between the ions gives you the biggest ionic charge. This is the gist of Coulomb's law, and that's what chemists usually use. We don't usually calculate anything, but we will use this to talk about the strengths of bonds.